It's not only TV personalities and celebrities being accused of bad behavior.
Stunning allegations against Democratic Senator Al Franken.
He mashed his lips against my face.
There's also the case of Roy Moore.
Mr. Moore reached over and began groping me.
Recently, another woman contacted the Washington Post with her own dramatic story about the Republican candidate.
I haven't even agreed to go through with the story yet.
She said he impregnated her when she was 15 and helped her arrange an abortion. But sensing that something was off about her story, a Washington Post reporter taped their meeting as she confronted the woman with evidence she was lying.
You reached out to us, we went ahead and did some background information, background checking.
In fact, a researcher at the newspaper found the woman had posted on the internet months earlier that she was starting work for an organization that tries to trip up the so-called mainstream media by tricking them into publishing fake news.
This is your chance to explain. Well, we're all on the record.
And just in from the Washington Post.
This week, the Post published its story about the scam and the organization, Project Veritas, that was behind it. Its owner didn't want to answer any questions.
We're done. Don't say a word, okay?
What does the episode say about the lengths to which some people will go to discredit news organizations they don't like? Callum Borchers writes about the intersection of politics and media for the Washington Post. So, Callum, what we've learned since that original story by the Post is that this woman's efforts to infiltrate the newspaper and ultimately, I guess, to get you to publish fake news was much deeper, much more prolonged than first realized. Give us a sort of a quick flavor of what's been learned since.
Right. This woman, Jamie Phillips, was joining journalism groups and showing up at social events, including some send-offs for Post employees, the idea being to befriend Post employees and strike up conversations with them, either in person or via text message. And the goal, of course, was to ultimately get records either on tape or perhaps in written form of journalists saying incriminating things that would reflect bias in the newsroom.
It's one thing in my experience for people to come to the news media with a story that when you look into it, it turns out to be untrue. It is quite another for someone to come to you with something they know is untrue to try to get a news organization to publish. We know that this seems to be the trademark of this Project Veritas, but is this a widespread problem as you know it?
Well, it's hard to gauge exactly how wide, but it's certainly not isolated. We can put it that way. I mean, we've seen episodes similar to this in recent months. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow, a popular TV host here in the U.S., told the story several months ago about receiving a fraudulent NSA document, a national security document that purported to tie the Donald Trump campaign to Russia. And the idea was that she would be duped into airing a report on this document and then would be exposed as a fake later. And it would be this huge embarrassment that would discredit reporting on that same subject. A reporter for New York Magazine has talked about a woman's undercover attempt to pose as a Harvey Weinstein accuser and perhaps dupe him into reporting a fake story that could be exposed for the same reason. So what our team experienced in recent weeks is certainly not isolated.
It's interesting because there were, 4 bylines on the Washington Post story about what it uncovered and this woman's motives. But you and I both know that that is extraordinary when you look at the real media landscape in the U.S. and in Canada. There aren't that many people working on a single story most of the time. Does it suggest that smaller newsrooms might be more vulnerable to this kind of thing?
There's no question that we enjoy resources at the Washington Post that most other newsrooms don't have. I think the flip side of that is that there may not be as many concerted efforts to fool smaller news outlets simply because the payoff wouldn't be as great, right? So if Project Veritas wants to try to discredit the mainstream media writ large, you have to go after a big target like us or the New York Times or NBC News or something like that. You wouldn't go after a local or regional publication. That said, though, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be efforts to dupe smaller news organizations into publishing false material and perhaps sort of gradually chip away at the media's credibility.
Callum, thanks for this. Appreciate it.
Glad to be with you.